The Billionaire's Bride for a Day by Shadonna Richards. Read by L.W. Salinas. Chapter 1. "It's urgent, Dane," Maya Belmont pleaded over the phone to her nephew. "You'd better come quick." There was a faint tremor in the aging woman's voice as she spoke. Urgent. Dane Romano, manager of the luxurious, historic Belmont Hotel, leaned forward in his executive leather office chair. He was never the type to get excited, even over catastrophic news. While on the phone in front of his computer, Dane sat facing an unobstructed view of the sunset on the waterfront through the floor-to-ceiling windows. His office overlooked Lake Belmont, in the town named after his paternal great-grandfather. Belmont was a highly sought-after community overlooking the shores of the lake east of Toronto, which was currently populated by affluent and self-made tycoons. He spent long hours at the office, even sleeping at the hotel in a guest suite, so having his desk face the view of the water was much-needed therapy. "What do you mean, urgent?" Dane tried to clarify, in a calm, controlled tone. "Oh, Dane, She hesitated. Earlier, Dane had seen a missed call on his cell from his father's private phone, but when he tried to call it back, the number was constantly busy. Was his father trying to reach out to his other brothers? Just what the hell was going on? "What's wrong, Aunt Maya?" He was on the landline phone with his aunt, while at the same time pressing the callback on his cell phone to try to reach his old man. But to no avail. The call went straight to voicemail. Great. Just what he needed right now. A staffing crisis at the hotel, and a family emergency. Still, family came first, even though the hotel was the family business. It was already the 1st of December, and Dane had a billion things to do. The hotel just hosted 2 practically royal weddings for his longtime friends, 2 of the Romero brothers. Dr. Alonso Romero to his new bride, and Troy Romero to the family's press secretary. The Romeros and the Belmonts traveled in the same social circles and often did business together. Dane couldn't believe all 8 of those once-sworn bachelors got hitched in such a short time. Normally, he could relate to the Romero brothers, but not where love was concerned. Well, good for them, but marriage would never be for him, and he knew his half-brothers felt the same way. Now he was gearing up for their busiest holiday season yet. They were already booked solid, and not just from anyone. The Belmonts hosted many distinguished guests, including the rich and famous from all over the world. A-list celebrities reserved their $5,000 a night exclusive Belmont suites, with gold-plated faucets and other luxury furnishings, while top executives from Fortune 500 companies booked Christmas parties at the hotel. The busy holiday season at the Belmont never seemed to stop. He knew Aunt Maya could be dramatic at times, but she was never one to make a fuss. Sure, she liked to gossip, chew out the boys from time to time, keep things in order at the Belmont Palace, but she would never get stirred up over something unless there was a good reason for it. "It's Jonah, your father," Maya said, her voice unsteady. He's not himself, Dane. I think he's losing it." "What do you mean, losing it?" Dane's tone hardened. "Well, he's just come back from the specialist." "The specialist?" "Yes, you know, the oncologist." "I thought he was all clear now. His cancer's supposed to be in remission, right?" "Well, I think he's received some bad news." Dane's heart collapsed in his chest. "Bad news? What did he say to you?" Dane's tone grew more serious. "Well..." Maya hesitated over the phone. She then cleared her throat. "The truth is, Dane, I couldn't quite catch everything he said." You know it's so hard to hear through those darn new French doors he had installed in the study. He always closes them shut when he's in there talking on the phone." Dane rolled his eyes and shook his head. "Aunt Maya," Dane chastised lovingly, "have you been listening in on other people's conversations again?" "Dane, you know your dear old aunt would never do a thing like that." "Oh, really now?" "Besides, that's not the point. He said he's going to see his boys right away, and he's going to make drastic changes at the hotel. He even called his lawyer over to make changes to his will." "What? Well, you had no trouble hearing that." "Very funny, Dane. He was speaking loudly. You know your father can wake up the dead when he raises those pipes of his." Dane grinned in spite of the gravity of the situation. "And he's also talking about this bucket list." "Bucket list?" Dane raked his fingers through his hair. He thought he'd heard it all, but now this. Since when did his old man talk about things like bucket lists? "Yes, Dane, but that's not all." Maya's voice sounded more choked. "He's got that old antique brass bucket in the study with him. He wants to fill it with his wishes. It's the bucket our grandfather, your great-grandfather, used to wash hotel windows before he opened his own after the war. Oh, Dane, he's really gone—" "I'll be right there, Aunt Maya. Don't worry about a thing." Dane hung up the phone. He then keyed in the extension to make a quick call to his secretary. Antique brass bucket from his great-grandfather? Bucket list. Was his old man dying? "Yes, boss?" Stella Ward answered the intercom in her usual cheerful voice, interrupting Dane's thoughts. She was their versatile office temp who wanted to learn about the hospitality industry. But she was also an aspiring food, travel, and culture journalist studying part-time. She'd applied for an internship at the Belmont's weekend magazine publication. "I need you to take all my calls, Stella. I'm out for the afternoon. Family emergency." "Sure thing, boss. Is everything okay?" Dane hesitated for a moment. "If I can help it, everything will be fine." Was that a promise he could even keep? Dane had already lost a parent. He wasn't ready to lose another. Not after he'd just become reacquainted with a family he didn't even know existed. Dane and Jonah hadn't gotten along when they'd first met. When Dane's mother died when he was a teen, he'd ended up hating the guy when he found out he was his biological father and what he'd done to his mother. But he'd soon learned that hate was a toxic, useless emotion, and his energy was better spent getting ahead in life and trying to prove that he was a good person. The holiday season was always difficult for Dane. It was at this time of the year many years ago when he'd lost his mother. He could still remember the day they found her body in her car in a parking lot outside of another hotel. She'd been working a double shift between two of her jobs, and the police ruled her death as carbon monoxide poisoning. She'd taken a nap in her car between her jobs and left the motor running. It was a brutally cold day, and Dane figured she'd wanted to keep warm. But if that hadn't killed her, exhaustion would have. She'd wanted to buy the boys a present if she could afford it, so they wouldn't have another Christmas of making their own gifts out of cardboard and their collective imagination. She shouldn't have had to struggle between two low-paying jobs. It wasn't fair. That was the reason, once successful, Dane earned a reputation in the hotel industry for being a fair employer. One who paid his staff way more than any other staff in the country in comparable positions. He never stopped giving back. That would never bring his mother back from the dead, nor would it heal the broken heart he'd endured from that loss. It was his way of dealing with what life dealt him. God, he hated holidays. He loathed the togetherness obligation that came with them. What if you just wanted to be alone? Non-couples were made to feel inadequate if they had no significant others to be with. No wonder rates of depression skyrocketed. That's why Dane loved to work. Work kept his mind active and shielded from pain. Yeah, the pain of heartbreak. Dane picked up the phone again as he logged off his computer. He had to at least alert his brother, if Aunt Maya hadn't done so already. He was grateful to have his father's side of the family. He didn't have many surviving relatives on his mother's side. It seemed as if those relatives were destined to be unsuccessful in love. He, too, knew the stabbing feeling of having his heart broken. The girl with whom he'd been living recently moved out and went back to her ex. Imagine that. After all he'd done for her. That served him right for getting involved with a rebounder. She'd just come out of a long-term relationship, and it took him 6 months to realize he was the rebound boyfriend. She'd gone right back to her ex after Dane helped her get sober. Of course, she had no idea, neither did he, that he was one of the lost heirs to the Belmont Empire. She'd tried to get back with him when she found out about his fortune, but he didn't bother to return her calls. Relationships. God, he hated them. He loved women, but he would never trust another one again. Especially one who was emotionally strung up like his ex had been. When Jonah gave Dane the opportunity to work for him and to send him to college to study business and hospitality management, he'd taken up the offer. Reluctant at first, he'd vowed one day to make a difference and create tons of lucrative jobs so single moms didn't have to suffer or struggle like his mom did just to barely survive. His mother lied to him about his real father and told him that his father died before he was born. Dane should have been a Belmont by name too, but he'd been born on the wrong side of the sheets. His mother was a cleaning lady at one of the Belmont Hotels, one of the 3 jobs she worked to support his older brother, and then Dane. His mother was seduced by her boss, the mighty Jonah Elias Belmont III. The next thing she knew, she was secretly carrying his child. Jonah was going through a divorce at the time. So why did Dane even give a damn about Jonah? Because when he looked Jonah in the eyes when he found out the truth and asked him point blank why the hell he left his mother with a child to raise on her own, the words he spoke ended his refusal to forgive, or even speak to the man. "I'm so sorry, Dane. I didn't even know you existed. If I did, I would have raised you the way I raise all my kids. You're a part of me, and you deserve the best. I didn't even know you existed." Like a haunting echo, the words lingered in Dane's mind. Dane could forgive that, but only that. Not the fact that his father was a rich womanizer who took advantage of his help, but the fact that he was genuinely sorry he didn't know about the pregnancy. Was his mother fearful of confronting Jonah because of his hard reputation in the business? Dane's curiosity was piqued. He wondered about his other legitimate siblings. Despite his old man's shortcomings, there was something about him that made it difficult for Dane to turn his back. "You okay, Dane?" Chase, his half-brother, walked into his office. "Stella said something about a family emergency. What's going on?" "I'm about to find out, bro." "I see a missed call from Dad," Chase said, scrolling down the screen of his smartphone. "He's probably trying to round us all up soon." Aunt Maya called, hysterical. She said she overheard him talking about making some drastic changes at the hotel. "This time looks different. Did you know Dad was still seeing the oncologist?" Chase shook his head. "You know I've been away for a while, Dane. I'm pretty much out of the family loop, or the family gossip vine." "Yeah, of course," Dane said. "This time he's talking about bucket lists, and he's actually using the brass bucket from the museum to put his wishes in." "You mean his last wishes?" "That's what I'm going to find out. I'm assuming, according to what Aunt Maya said, he's putting his list in there." "Tell me about it. Do Cole and Leo know?" "They're at the other site. I just sent them a text. Good. Of all the half-brothers on his father's side he'd come to know over the last few years, Dane felt closer to Chase, the black sheep of the family, the outsider. Each of his brothers on his father's side had different mothers through the various marriages. They were all born in wedlock, except Dane. Jonah kept having kids as long as he was in a relationship. Dane paused at the door. Settle down and have kids before it gets too late, son. What are you and your brothers waiting for? Like a haunting whisper, his father's words swept into his mind. If Dane waited until he was in his 50s or 60s, he might not get enough time to spend with his children, or the woman of his dreams. Private Detective Jojo Knight weaved through traffic to make his way over to the Belmont Palace. I thought you were no longer detecting, his business partner Travis said. You gave that up to focus on the business, remember? You've got us running the PI agency, but you're supposed to be focusing on the security systems branch. You have a major product launch coming up, Jojo. You can't mess around with that. Millions of customers have already pre-ordered your latest tracking gadget. Man, that thing is taking off and hitting the web big time. I know. Jojo was grateful to have his side business take off. After working on so many gigs for the Romeros and other high-profile clients involving scandalous tapes, kidnapping, as well as extortion attempts, among other things, he'd developed an affordable security tracking device that could be hidden on persons or kids by parents who feared for their safety. He already had a team handling the customer service division and product development. But Jojo wasn't really hands-on with that stuff. He much preferred doing hands-on work, solving problems for his clients. Well, you know what they say. You can take the detective out of a job, Jojo started. But you can't take the detective out of a man, Travis finished for him. Exactly. Besides, it's not really work, Jojo said in his defense. It's just a personal favor to Mr. Belmont. A brief special project on the side. Special project? Yeah, he's looking for some lost heirs. He says he might not have long to go, and he needs to know if there are more kids out there he doesn't know about. He thinks there might be one or two. I think this case should be interesting. Kinda like a missing persons thing, only the persons don't know they're missing. Huh. This guy sounds like he's been busy in his love life. Imagine when or if you do find more heirs for him. Being a Belmont? Holy, that's like finding out your royalty. Please let me know what you find out. I will. Hey, wasn't he married a few times? Yeah. He told me he also had a few affairs between marriages. He has a gut feeling his mistresses might have conceived. He just wants to be sure, that's all. He wants to make sure if he does have kids out there, they get a share of what he has. That's noble of him. And you're real nice to do this, Jojo. You know Mr. Belmont is a close friend of Tony Romero, right? They go way back. Right. Seems like the rich and powerful stick together. Or at least flock together. Yeah, seems like it. Well, the Romeros mean a lot to me. Tony asked if I could speak to Mr. Jonah Belmont III. So I said yeah. The Romeros are good people. They were always there for me during the rough times. I'll do anything for them. I see. And anyone who's a friend of theirs is a friend of mine. I hear you. Well, let me know how things go, and if you need a couple men on the job with you. I'll let you know. I think I can get some prelim stuff done on my own. I'm on my way there now. He's supposed to be meeting up with a few of his, legitimate kids. Right. Gotcha. Travis laughed. When Dane and Chase arrived at the Belmont Palace, as the massive 75-room mansion had been dubbed by the media, Ted, the butler, greeted them and led the two into the grand study. The luxury home was often talked about because of its unique, stately designed rooms, secret passages, and verdant gardens, befitting of modern royalty. Most of Dane's brothers and he owned penthouse condos in the city, closer to work. As Dane entered through the double French glass doors into the study, he saw Jonah cozily sitting by the crackling fireplace in his blue velvet robe, with the brass antique bucket on his lap. Aunt Maya wasn't kidding, was she? Had his old man really lost it? Even before he knew the ruthless tycoon was his real daddy, Dane admired the man's tenacity in the business arena. He was always a sharpshooter and went against conventional thinking to break through in his business pursuits. He really never gave a damn about how the media painted him. As long as they're talking about me, I'm somebody, and somebody important, he'd famously said in a TV interview. But now, looking at his old man, still defiant, yet vulnerable, was hard for Dane. "So glad you could make it, Dane," Jonah said, his tone brusque and commanding. Then he turned to see all his sons in the room. "I see you all got my message. Good." Jonah leaned back in his hand-tooled chair by the fireplace, his jaw set. "Dad, you left an urgent message about something to do with drastic changes at the hotels and in your will." "What's going on?" Chase asked, standing up by the bookshelf with his hands in his pockets. "As you all might know, I've been seeing a specialist for that old pancreas of mine." "Yes, we know, Dad," Cole said, his voice low and sorrowful. Cole was dressed in his business attire, much like the rest of his brothers. They'd all left what they were doing in their individual jobs, working within the Belmont Hotel and Resorts empire. "Well," Jonah continued, "it looks as if I don't have much time." "What?" Chase's voice rang with alarm. "What's that supposed to mean?" Dane could feel his heart muscles contract. "I'm going to cut to the chase, sons. Barring a miracle, Doc says 6 months, 12 tops. "Oh, God, Dad." Dane could feel his blood pump hard and his veins constrict. "Are you serious?" Dane tried hard not to show emotion, but it was damned difficult. He'd been down this road with his mother. He was 29 and already had to deal with the death of his mother when he was a teen. Now his father, too? "You know, I realize people die, but as someone once said, I always thought I'd be the exception." Jonah chuckled. Dane swallowed hard, but the lump just wouldn't go down. He thought he would choke on his own emotion. Yeah, funny. He always thought hard-riding Jonah would always be around. Jonah was supposed to be immortal. He was as tough as proverbial nails and could pretty much conquer anything. Now, boys," Jonah pacified, leaning forward. He placed the brass bucket on the side table beside him. "I'm 75, he continued. "That's not a bad age, but my only regret is that I put off marriage and having kids till I was way into my 40s and early 50s. I never factored in that I might not be around to see you all marry and have kids of your own. I wanted more than anything to be a grandfather, to show my grandkids the ropes." He clasped the brass bucket handed down to him from his grandfather. "Just as my own grandfather had played such a strong part in my life," Jonah said, an emotional edge to his steady tone. "Oh, Jonah, I know how much that means to you, but you can't dwell on that now." Aunt Maya walked into the study, wiping her apron. She'd just finished making her special homemade lasagna. Aunt Maya was Jonah's younger sister. She was a 70-year-old widow who had sadly lost her husband many years ago. They never had any children of their own, but Aunt Maya was godmother to about 16 children of her friends and cousins, and she was a maternal figure to Jonah's boys. She took her role as auntie incredibly seriously. As such, she got on their nerves at times, too. The aroma wafted to Dane's nostrils. Usually, he'd be salivating for a home-cooked meal. But he needed to find out more about what was going on with Jonah. "I've already spoken to the lawyers about this." Jonah cleared his throat and he held up his chin. "This bucket I have right here beside me is more than just a bucket. It is symbolic of the Belmont family line
and the Belmont magic that was my grandfather.
I know, Dad, Leo said soothingly.
I know you've heard the story before. Jonah Belmont came back from the First War, injured, no other job in sight, but he was given a brass bucket from a shop owner. And he used the bucket to fill it with water and offered his services to anyone who needed to have their windows cleaned. But it wasn't just that. He'd met your grandmother, who was the daughter of a store owner. Not one for handouts, he'd created his own job.
And that led to him working for a small bed and breakfast, which he ended up taking over and turned into the first Belmont Motel, which then became a hotel and grew to what it is today. A worldwide conglomerate. Dane finished for him.
Yes, that's right. This bucket held dreams. And today, it is what I will fill with my bucket list items.
Bucket list items?
Yes. My last wishes are to see that you, my sons, fulfill the Belmont honor that is more than simply making money. It is about making love count. Carrying on the family line. Marrying and bringing joy to that special someone and bringing children into the world. This hotel is a family dynasty, and it must remain so.
Dad, what are you saying? Cole asked.
2 things.
2 things?
Yes. The first is that, since there isn't much time, I would like to have you boys stay here for the year at the estate. There are 75 rooms. I know you all visit often, but I want to spend family time with you.
Sure thing, Dad, Chase concurred. Of course, Dane added. You really didn't even have to tell us, Jonah. Chase and I spoke about it on the way over here. We were planning to move back in to be with you in any case.
That's good to hear, sons.
The rest of the boys agreed.
And secondly, before the 6 months or the year is up, I want to fill this bucket with a boutonniere from each of you, signifying that you've married and settled down in order to receive the Belmont family blessing.
The Belmont family blessing?
Yes, you heard right. My grandfather's lucky brass bucket that led to building this very hotel legacy was also a place where he stored his boutonniere. His marriage to my grandmother was a long and happy one. The same with my father. He placed and stored his boutonniere in this bucket, and he also enjoyed a long, loving relationship with his wife and success too. Now, me being who I was, the rebel, I decided I wasn't going to go for that hogwash. But then look at me. 4 failed marriages, and I'm alone now. I don't want the same for you boys. You must carry on the tradition.
The look on Dane and his brothers' faces must have been priceless, because even Aunt Maya's jaw fell wide open. Jonah, you must be running a fever again, Aunt Maya said. Let me check your forehead. She hurried over to where her brother was seated.
No,
Jonah said, waving her hand away from his head.
There's nothing wrong with me. It's the boys you should be checking, Maya.
The boys?
Yes. Good-looking, successful young men who can't seem to maintain a relationship. They use the silliest excuses, and they think life will always be around for them. They're not even trying. I've even attempted to fix them up on blind dates, and what do? Don't call the girl back.
Now that's not true, Dad. You know that. Leo chimed in.
Yes, it is true, Leo. Whatever happened to that friend of yours? That nice girl?
Leo said nothing. He dropped his head in embarrassment.
Don't use workaholism as an excuse, Leo. And Chase, I know you find it hard to trust women again after that, scandal with that social media leak and that tape. But not all women are gold diggers. This coming from a man who's married a couple times.
Actually, 4 times, Jonah. Jonah gave his sister the look.
Thank you for correcting me, Maya.
You're welcome, Jonah.
Anyway, Chase, you need to settle down with a good woman, not someone who's in the limelight. Just an ordinary, good-hearted woman. Stop going after these drama queens. That's where your trouble lies.
And the parties, Maya added. You need to take a break from all those high-profile bashes you get invited to, Chase. Not to mention the models you date, as thin as the toothpicks on my kitchen counter. She placed her hands on her hips. Don't they ever eat?
Aunt Maya, please don't try to help,
Chase said. Sorry. She shrugged. I'll go back to the kitchen to check on the lasagna.
And Dane, I know you've only just recently come to know me as your father, but I worry about you, son. I know you've been burned badly by love before, but honestly, there are good women out there. I promise you. Never stop searching for love, because what you search for and seek out in life, you will find. Thanks, Jonah. But really, I don't think I'm going down that road again.
And that was the truth. He'd thought he was in love with Sophie, until he'd found out she'd been using him. They met when she was getting over her ex. After they started living together briefly, he found out that he was only a rebound boyfriend. She went straight back to her ex. So much for helping out others. They'd planned on getting married. He'd announced it, but little did he know she was planning to go back with her rich lawyer ex. Then Sophie found out Dane was an heir to the Belmont dynasty and tried to swing some moves on him. Of course, he ignored her. Women and Dane did not make for a long-term relationship. There was no way in hell, no matter how much he loved his father, he would traverse that road again. Not even for a bucket list item. And I thought bucket lists were for things you wanted to do, not what you want others to do, Dane said. Ted interrupted the discussion when he came into the room.
Excuse me, sir,
Ted said to Jonah.
You have a guest here. Mr. Jojo? Ah, yes. I've asked my good friend Tony Romero to lend me the services of their wonderful detective Jojo. Detective?
Dane asked.
Why? Because, my dear son, I have a limited time left to set things straight. I need Jojo for a few things, including ensuring the family name stays good. Stays good? Well, it is possible that something might surface in the future that could possibly destroy everything the family has worked for.
Yes, that's right, Aunt Maya said, walking back into the study, adjusting her apron. Are you going to tell them now, Jonah, about...
Enough,
Jonah snapped at his sister.
Not now, Maya.
Maya frowned and folded her arms across her chest, her lips pinched tight. Jonah ignored her and added,
I need Jojo to find any other children I might have.
What? Chase said.
Yes, sons. I have been very careful, but it is my belief that Dane might not be my only child born out of wedlock. I might have one or possibly two more heirs. I want to set the record straight and make sure I tie up any loose ends before I go. Hello, Mr. B.
Jojo made an appearance in the study. His 6'5" frame was always a sight. He looked more like a combat soldier than a detective. And Dane and his brothers were all over 6 feet too. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and lean, and Dane had seen him a few times around his friends, the Romeros, at family functions and gatherings. He'd never seen the man smile before, and he honestly wondered if he ever did. But the man always got things done.
Hey, Jojo, what's up?
Dane said. Jojo nodded.
Thank you for coming, Jojo,
Jonah said.
I've just finished talking to the boys about my bucket list challenge, and I was explaining to them about your assignment.
He handed Jojo papers from the desk table.
These are the names of the women I've had relationships with. Please find out what you can, Jojo.
Sure thing, Mr. B, Jojo said. He took the papers and shifted through them. I'll wait in your office.
Thank you,
Jonah said, before turning to the boys.
So, back to the reason you're all here. You're really serious, aren't you, Jonah?
Dane said.
First this bucket list, then... Well, you know me, Dane. I'm not exactly conventional. I make my own rules if it makes better sense. You remember I told you about Nessa, my first girlfriend? Yes. Well, she was always so good to me, but I wasn't ready to settle down. This was back in 1962 before I reopened the Belmont and turned it into what it is today. Well, she married and ended up staying with the guy for 50 years before he passed on. I ended up never falling in love the way I did with Nessa and married so many times afterwards. Don't be like me. Anyway, boys, you have no choice. What do you mean we have no choice? Chase asked. I'm serious about you boys not wasting your life or your fortune on being single, swinging playboys who'll dishonor the family name, or wait until it's too late to enjoy a family of your own. If you don't do what I ask, you'll have to go it alone. What's that supposed to mean? Chase said. Tough love, son. I'm giving you all tough love. Marry so that I can fulfill my last wish, or you'll be cut from the will and removed as executors of the Belmont estate. The temperature in the room dropped. You can't be serious, Dane said. I'm very serious, son. Before I transition to the other side, I need to know that all of you are happily married and will continue the Belmont tradition. Don't dismiss being in a caring, loving relationship. You've all avoided long-term relationships like the blasted plague. I've heard you talk about never getting married. What do you think you'll do? End up growing old alone? Take a look at successful people. Most of them have love in their lives. Love is all around, son. You've just got to find it. Whatever you look for in life, I promise, you will find it.
Chapter 2. Olivia McAlister sat in a daze with the phone pressed to her ear at the historic Belmont Hotel suite the night before her wedding. What do you mean you're backing out? Olivia felt the breath being squeezed out of her lungs. Her heart hammered hard and fast in her chest. She needed air, like yesterday. A sigh over the phone was all she could hear. Jack, I'm talking to you. What do you mean you're backing out of our wedding? You mean you want us to elope instead?
Listen, Olivia, that's just it. You never know what I want. Hell, I don't know what I want sometimes. I've realized I haven't had a chance to explore life yet. I just what, Jack? Listen, I'm backing out of the wedding and that's it. I'm sorry. I'll call my side of the family and tell them it's off too.
Jack, don't do this. Why are you doing this? Silence on the other end of the phone line. Is this how you treat somebody you love? Someone who's always there for you? She continued, her voice trembling. I supported you through law school, and now that you've graduated, you don't want me anymore? This is our wedding you're talking about, not some stock option.
Look, Olivia, marriages, are investments. Emotional investments. I'm just not ready. I was thinking I couldn't go through with the wedding before, but I thought the feeling would settle down. But it didn't. Maybe it's cold feet.
What? You seemed okay with us getting married when I was doing your homework assignments for you. Who did all your research for you? I did.
Listen, I'll pay you for all the work you did for me. I really appreciate all you've done for me, Olivia.
Olivia resisted the urge to scream. She fought valiantly to stifle the tears. Appreciation? Some appreciation. If she was being truthful with herself, she noticed Jack's distance lately. But she thought it was just because of the bar exam. She was not so much angry as she was sad and embarrassed. Fine. You know what? Goodbye, Jack.
Olivia, wait. I don't want us to end like this. I know how you feel.
You don't know, Jack.
Now that's not fair. No, this is not fair. Have a nice life.
Olivia had to hang up the phone before she exploded into a river of tears. After Olivia hung up, she put her head down in her hands. She was hyperventilating. She had to get air. Her lungs burned. She quickly moved over to the bar in the hotel room and grabbed one of the paper bags on the countertop. She unfolded it and pressed the opening against her mouth and nose and took deep breaths. Exhale all the crap that was on her mind right now, and inhale all the confidence and strength she could. Jack was gone, out of her life. He was calling off their wedding. Now, at the last minute, Olivia's limbs were numb and felt limp. Her brain was so fried that she could not process anything. She was crushed, devastated, numb with shock. What was she going to do? This was all so surreal. A nightmare. A horrific nightmare before Christmas Day. Her wedding day. Her body trembled. Jack was leaving her now? He was jilting her the night before their wedding? Still, if Olivia was being truly honest with herself, she'd noticed that Jack wasn't his usual attentive self in the last few months. He'd been pulling away emotionally. There was something wrong, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it. He'd always have a baggage load of problems tagging along with him. He was always uptight over the littlest things, seemingly blaming her for his misfortunes. Not only did he have a mountain of student debts, but he'd also done a little gambling on the side to try to pay off his debt, and ended up owing more. But what did she do? She ignored the aching feeling inside her telling her that he didn't really want her, telling her that other things were more important to him in his life, and that did not include her. But she wanted so desperately to make it work. She really wanted a family. But now the reality was, it wasn't going to happen anytime soon. Oh no. She'd already moved out of her studio apartment she'd shared with Jack. Her things were in storage. She was waiting to move in the new year. New marriage, new home, new beginning. So why did this feel like the end? They were supposed to move into their new rental condo apartment on New Year's Day, on the east side after their Christmas wedding. The plan was to be on their honeymoon during that time. What would become of that now? There was no way she could afford the rent on that place. Alone, anyway. Great. So now she was groomless and homeless. Could things get any worse? Olivia felt her heart muscles squeeze mercilessly in her chest. This must be a dream. A hallucination. This was not happening. It could not be happening. She thought of her grandmother's advice to her when she had trouble in the past. If life gives you lemons, you sweeten them to make lemonade. Right now, she couldn't imagine anything that could sweeten the bitterness she felt inside her heart. Jack was gone. It was over. How could he do this to her? How could he dump her like this after all they'd been through together? 300 guests. 300 guests would be showing up tomorrow morning at the chapel. And Olivia was groomless. This was the ultimate disgrace. Olivia gasped when she looked over at the bedside table. A card signed by the women at the survivors' camp sat atop it. She had lost her own mother to breast cancer just 2 Christmases earlier and had successfully undergone a removal of a lump in her own breast. Thankfully, it was benign and she was cancer-free. She reached over to the table and picked up the pretty red card with floral designs and scanned all the precious signatures within it. To the Belmont Christmas Bride. Best wishes on your special day. Olivia cherished the moniker they'd given her.
The Belmont Christmas bride. Ha! She was more like the Belmont disgraced bride. She would be the laughingstock of the entire town. Earlier that day, the staff even greeted her as the Belmont Christmas bride when she arrived with her sister, Bria, at the check-in counter. "Oh, you're the Belmont Christmas bride this year," they'd welcomed her with warm smiles. "Every Christmas, we have one lucky bride who gets married in our famous ballroom. Congratulations, ma'am." "Thank you," she had gushed. Bria beamed with excitement. Finally, they would have wonderful memories for Christmas Day, even if Mom couldn't be here physically. The truth was, she could not afford to host her wedding there. It was a donation from the management team at the hotel that gave away an affordable wedding package to one lucky couple each year, and Olivia and Jack were supposed to be that one lucky couple this year. But that was not going to happen now, was it? The phone rang again. She spun her head around to the noise. Jack was calling her again. She really didn't want this. Not now. Olivia intended to ignore it, but she sucked in a deep breath and walked over to the phone, her heart still revving over the limit. She was sure her blood pressure must be through the roof. She picked up the phone. "Jack, you are one crazy, inconsiderate jerk. I don't want to speak with you again. I don't want to see you again, and—" "Whoa, I think you've got the wrong guy, miss." A smooth, deep voice that sent tingles down her spine sounded over the phone instead. It wasn't Jack. Oh, God. This was more than embarrassing. Now someone else knew Jack and Olivia were no longer an item. Could this day get any worse? Sorry. Who is this?" Heat rushed to her face and slithered down her neck. Shit. This was humiliating. Damn, Jack. "Dane, I was told you needed some assistance. Is everything okay?" His silky voice lulled her into a relaxed mood. Dane? Oh, God. Was she that loud when she'd argued with Jack over the phone? Had one of the other guests complained about the noise coming from her suite? Well, no. Yes. Yes, I'm fine. He was told she needed assistance? Olivia lifted her head and turned her gaze toward the adjoining door in her suite. Great. The hotel guests in the adjoining room could probably hear her sobbing and arguing with Jack. Did they phone the front desk? "I'll send someone up right away." Dane's mellow baritone voice was edged with control and authority. He didn't wait for her to answer. Her hesitance may have sparked an alarm. For all he knew, she could be held against her will in her own room. He sounded like a man not to be reckoned with. After Olivia replaced the phone on the receiver, she clenched her jaw and hugged herself. Her heart was pounding hard and fast. What was with her? She really didn't want anyone to see her like this. Not now. Especially not a man with a rich, sexually charged baritone voice that made her tingle in places that ought not be tingling. Her mascara was probably running down her face after her teary conversation with Jack. She got up and paced in front of the fireplace. Oh, God. She was going to be humiliated in front of hundreds of her friends she hadn't seen in years, as well as her family. Her heart wasn't broken. It was shattered in a million tiny pieces. Her eyes drifted to the dark sky outside and the blowing snowflakes falling against it. It should have been the most romantic evening of her life. Christmas Eve. Tomorrow was supposed to be her Winter Wonderland-themed wedding in the ballroom of the hotel. All the decorations were in place. Hotel staff had congratulated her earlier. But Winter Wonderland was nothing more than a frigid nightmare. Icy fear twisted around her heart. Olivia felt numb with shock.
She felt like a fool, like a walking disaster in stilettos. Moments later, a knock at the door distracted her thoughts. Olivia glanced in the mirror over the dresser to make sure she didn't look as bad as she felt. She dabbed her swollen eyes and removed some of the mascara that had run down her cheeks after her torrent of tears. The last thing she needed was to be the guest of honor at her own pity party. "Just a minute," she called out, her voice quivering. She had to get a hold of herself. She had to regain her composure. When she opened the door, her jaw dropped. Standing in front of her was a sex god. The most delicious, tall, dark, and sexy man she'd ever laid her large brown eyes on. And he was wearing a tailored dark gray suit that accentuated what appeared to be a fit, athletic build. "Stop drooling, Olivia." She couldn't help but look up to him as his head almost reached the top of the doorframe. How tall was he? 6'5"?
Hi, is everything okay?
His smooth, deep voice sent shivers down her spine again. Yes.
I'm Dane Romano from management. I called earlier.
And I'm speechless. Damn it, Olivia. He's just a man. A fellow human being. Hello? Where are your thoughts? Olivia had almost forgotten who she was for a split second. Okay, that had never happened to her before. I'm Olivia, she finally responded, almost breathless, almost too breathless for her liking.
Yes, you're Ms. Olivia McAlister, the Christmas bride, right? You'll be getting married in the morning?
Well, that killed the moment. She cast down her eyes. Suddenly, her eyelids grew heavy, and there was that pronounced palpitation thing going on in her chest again.
May I come in?
He asked, obviously noticing her abrupt change in body language. Sure, she said, opening the door wider while trying to swallow the lump that lingered in her throat. Well, her nostrils caught a whiff of his enticing cologne, which, strangely enough, had a calming effect on her. God, it was irresistible. It was as if, for all her troubles that night, the universe had granted her a consolation prize of some sort. Only Dane's presence was more than a mere consolation. It was a little boost of goodness Olivia genuinely needed so that she wouldn't feel as if her whole life was shot to hell right now. There was something about this man's aura. Of course, he was probably taken. All the good ones were. A vaguely sensuous spark seemed to pass between them. Was he a hallucination she'd conjured up after being dumped on the night before her wedding? Or a God-sent angel in the disguise of the hottest guy she'd ever laid eyes on? When his gaze met hers, her heart turned over in her chest. Olivia could feel the sexual magnetism Dane radiated. Mixed feelings surged through her. Her emotions seemed so out of control. Disquieting thoughts raced through her mind. What was going on inside her? Why hadn't she ever felt this way with Jack? This was beyond absurd. What was this? Kismet? No, it couldn't be. This man was obviously taken, and, well, she was obviously betrothed to someone else, who happened to have dumped her moments ago over the phone. But, oh, those piercing blue eyes framed by long, thick lashes. His eyes were as blue as the ocean in summer and dangerously engaging. Mysterious. His smooth olive complexion and his chiseled cheekbones and shiny dark cropped hair made it look like he'd stepped right off the cover of the latest edition of GQ to come to her rescue. He looked too good to be true. I guess you've heard complaints about this room. Olivia spoke softly. She didn't know what else to say. Dane glanced around. What was he doing? Assessing the torn notes she'd left on the floor after she'd gotten off the phone with Jack? The clothes strewn on the bed? The obvious signs of a woman distressed and scorned by her fiancé moments ago?
We received a call from a concerned guest in the hotel,
he said discreetly, his sexy ocean blue eyes directed back to her. How thoughtful of him. He could have said room XYZ called and said some crazy woman was next door, having an argument with her lover, and obviously didn't know what quiet conversation meant. Olivia guessed discretion was a managerial imperative. Dane was peering at Olivia intently, so much so that she felt the heat of his gaze. Holy moly. Why was this stranger having this sort of effect on her? Unbelievable. Especially at a time like this. When Dane's gaze met hers, Olivia's heart turned over in response. Okay, maybe it was her just jilted nerves taking over. She should not read into it anymore. She glanced down at the gold-plated name on his suit. It read, Dane Romano, General Manager, Belmont Hotel and Resort. Almost instinctively, her gaze dropped to his left hand. Bare. No rings. Not even a tan line or evidence of any wedding bands ever gracing his long, tanned, slender fingers. His hands looked strong and capable, yet smooth. She wondered in her mind what they would feel like over her. Stop it, Olivia. Focus. Wait a minute. You're the GM? What are you doing working here at this time of night?
I decided to stay late since it's Christmas Eve. During the holiday season, it can get pretty crazy around here, so we all do our part to make sure things run smoothly. I'll be heading out soon.
Huh. Not too many highly ranked executives in an organization such as the Belmont Hotel and Resort would stay late on a holiday weekend. It was Christmas Eve, and you would think that the GM of a luxury hotel such as this would be cozying up by the Christmas tree next to the fireplace with his significant other, his 2.4 children, and maybe the family pet. And not just any pet, but a dog. He seemed like a dog man. In a good way, of course. Olivia couldn't help but feel a tinge of jealousy for whomever was his love interest. He must have been involved in a relationship. Or perhaps he was engaged. Of course, Olivia murmured thoughtfully. That's nice of you. Her eyes were stinging again. She and Jack had planned to have 2.4 children and a pet. Actually, Jack had protested over getting a pet. He claimed he was allergic to pet dander. No, not the tears again. She was not going to shed another tear for Jack. He simply wasn't worth her sorrow. Not anymore. Dane could not believe the dainty woman before him, graceful as a swan. She stole his breath away without even realizing it. He could tell a lot in a few seconds about a woman's composure, her facial expression, her lips, her natural beauty. She looked as elegant and sophisticated as those Hollywood movie stars of the silver screen era. She looked so humble, yet so broken. He wasn't usually the type of guy to butt in, but he really had to know who caused this pretty little thing in front of him to have swollen, red-rimmed eyes. She was far too hot to be in agony.
Is there anything you'd like to talk about?
He asked, trying to contain his anger at the jerk, he was sure it was a guy, who had caused her so much pain. Her beautiful brown eyes barely met his gaze. She looked down as if she was going to burst into tears again. He reached over and did something he'd never really done before. He hugged her, and the feel of her body in his arms caused his groin to react. That almost never happened when he hugged someone. "It's over," Olivia cried out into his chest. He's gone. He's leaving me." Dane pulled away from her as if fire had scorched him.
Your groom?
He had to clarify. Olivia held her head down and covered her face with her hands.
Oh, man, I'm really sorry, Olivia.
He really was. But he shouldn't be the one apologizing to her right now. If he could find this creep, he'd drag his butt through the street and demand he apologize on his knees and beg for forgiveness from this young lady. What kind of a jerk leaves his bride-to-be in a hotel alone and dumps her before the wedding? Something in Dane's gut told him she was way too nice to deserve this. No woman deserved this, regardless. But he could just tell it must have been all this Jack dude's fault.
Do you want to talk about it?
Dane fought to soften his tone, but knew his controlled voice must have probably sounded more dangerous than soft. He'd seen this groom-to-be the other day when the couple came to the hotel to make arrangements and book the rooms, the chapel, and the ballroom for Christmas Day. Of all the low-down, dirty things a guy could do to a girl, that was freaking unacceptable in Dane's book. Olivia dabbed her face with some tissues she'd grabbed from the box on the side table. "It's okay. It doesn't matter," she said, her voice hoarse and shaken. God, it squeezed Dane's heart to see this pretty young woman going through so much turmoil. The crazy part was, he didn't know her from Adam, but there was something about her that pulled him to her. Something that tugged at his heartstrings, and that didn't happen often either. He'd had his fair share of sexy women, but there was something sweet, kind, and pure about Olivia McAlister. He just didn't know what it was, but it was there. Inner angst gnawed at him. Dane was instantly reminded of his ex, Sophie, and how she'd done a heartbreaking number on him in a similar fashion. Then the emotional torment came flooding back through his veins. God, he hated insensitive people who trashed the hearts of others without a thought. "I'm calling off the wedding. I don't care if we lose the deposit. I don't care if everyone shows up tomorrow. I'm going away." At that moment, something crazy came over Dane. He didn't know what it was, but before he could stop himself, the words flew out of his lips.
"The hell you are."
Chapter 3. "I'm sorry?" Olivia could not believe her ears.
"Oh, no. I don't mean it like that. Don't let that guy ruin your day twice. What I meant was, so what if you don't have a groom? If he could leave you at a time like this, he probably wasn't worth it in the first place. It's a holiday tomorrow, and I'm sure everyone canceled their family plans to be here for you."
You have a point, and wow, you really do speak your mind.
They don't pay me to be a hypocrite. Professional, yes. A hypocrite, no.
But what are you saying?
"Olivia,"
Dane said.
"I don't know you, but I do know you don't deserve to be screwed over twice on your big day."
I don't understand.
"It's not about the money or anything else, but there are some things in life you just can't put a price tag on."
Oh?
"Yeah, and self-respect is one of them."
Olivia's heart flip-flopped in her chest. Usually, she was the one in her new career as a social worker to tell women that. Empowerment. Now, this gorgeous young man was giving her some of that same medicine? Wow.
"Just do me a favor," he continued. "Don't let this Jack guy screw you over twice. Tomorrow is your big day, and you may not have a groom, but you can still have your wedding or a celebration."
Wow, those are strong words, she said, feeling helpless. Alone. She felt terrible feeling this way. Here Dane was trying to make her feel better about herself, and yet she was resisting. Olivia glanced over at the garment bag with her Vera Wang silk wedding dress. She dreamed of walking down the aisle in this dress. Her day. It was supposed to be a turning point in her life. It's a lot easier said than done, Dane. You're sweet, really, but you're...
What? A guy? First of all, I'm anything but sweet. I'm simply practical.
I take it you've been hurt before.
Who hasn't? He responded casually. You live. You get hurt. You can either recover and move on, or you can dwell on the so-called injustice and stay put. Life is about choices, Olivia. We may not always have control over what crap happens to us, but we do have control over what stuff happens inside us. Despite herself, Olivia couldn't help but grin. It was painful to smile at a time like this, but this Dane guy really had a way with words. Listen, I'm going to be leaving the hotel soon. Have you had anything to eat?
Besides humble pie? She said softly, arching a brow. I mean, this is quite a humbling situation to be in the night of your wedding. She smiled wryly. An amused grin touched the corner of his sweet, full lips. He really had sexy lips for a guy. The type of lips you wanted to press your own to.
I like a girl with a sense of humor.
Waves of delight wiggled through Olivia's belly. What was that? Was it because after being rejected by one man she'd trusted, she was now in the company of a hot guy who seemed to appreciate her for who she was? It wasn't as if she looked like a model or anything. For goodness sake, she had scary mascara streaks running down her face.
Listen, why don't we get away from here and go down the street to the Belmont restaurant? It's still open. The food is usually hot and tasty.
Okay. Olivia smiled appreciatively. She couldn't believe what was happening. As carolers belted out Christmas songs on the street outside, and decorated lampposts glistened while cascading snow fell, she felt a tinge of warmth come over her heart, which had been iced over earlier. It was good to know there were still decent people around. Decent guys who were also hot as sin. I'll get ready.
Good. I'll meet you downstairs in the lobby if you like.
Thank you, she whispered. And with those words, hot, sexy, and Mr. Bad Boy to the rescue walked out of Olivia's hotel suite.
Her groom ditched her?
Chase turned to his brother Dane incredulously. He'd been in the office, helping Dane out with the figures on Christmas Eve. They'd had a few staff members call in sick because of the flu virus going around. Dane and his brothers were trying to get things in order so they would be able to help Aunt Maya get ready for her home-cooked Christmas special tomorrow. He knew it could very well be Jonah's last Christmas. The thought of Jonah's bucket list still haunted Dane.
Yeah,
Dane said, his tone dangerously low.
He called it off tonight.
If only Dane could get a moment with this Jack character. Olivia was way too fine to have someone pull a low stunt like that on her. He could tell a lot from first impressions of a woman. And Olivia was a true lady. No matter what, no woman deserved that. Period. I'm real sorry to hear she went through all that. The sinking feeling stayed with Dane long after he'd left Olivia's suite. He'd been there. He wasn't about to admit it to a perfectly sweet stranger, but he could certainly relate to that unbearable pain of having your heart ripped out from you without notice by someone you thought you could trust, someone you thought had your back. Heartbreak was probably one of the most soul-crushing emotional pains he'd ever experienced. He'd never trust a woman again. He could relate to Olivia's pain. And man, he really wanted to make her feel better tonight. And tomorrow. He'd think of something. Well, one man's loss is another man's treasure. Chase smirked, trying to lighten the mood in the office.
Now what's that supposed to mean?
Well, you know. Chase shot Dane a knowing glance.
No, Chase, I don't know.
Dane sighed heavily. Short memory. Dad just gave us an ultimatum, remember?
And?
Dane arched his brow. Well, you've got a bride who needs a groom.
Chase, I've got a bride in our hotel who needs a good friend, not a groom. Besides,
Dane's voice choked.
I've been down that road before with my ex. I already told Dad he can cut me out of the will if it pleases him, but I'm not forcing myself to marry for any reason. Besides
What?
You know what they say about rebound relationships.
Oh, man. I know Sophie hurt you real bad. I shouldn't have brought it up. It's just that I want us all to honor Dad's last wish.
I love Jonah. You know that. It's just that this wish of his is ridiculous. Speaking of which, what are you going to do about honoring his last wish?
I don't know about me.
Dad can't really be serious about forcing me to pick up any girl to put a ring on her finger after what I've been through. Hooking up with media-chasing models who don't mind talking about me to the tabloids. I can't trust any woman again, Dane. I'm going it alone. I have no choice. You know what Jonah always says, Chase. We always have a choice.
Dane lowered his timbre, impersonating his father's robust voice. Well, some choices are better off not being made, Chase retorted, grinning. Chapter 4.